Welcome, my friends, to the Bob and Brad podcast, produced by Bob and Brad, the two most famous physical therapists on the internet. I am Bob. I'm exactly one half of the Bob and Brad team, and today my guest host is
Mike Keenetz, physical therapist assistant.
And Mike is going to help me interview Rick Olderman, and we're going to talk about back pain, knee and hip pain, shoulder pain, and foot and ankle pain. So stick around.
Because you're going to realize everything's connected.
Right. Welcome to the program, Rick Olderman. So excited to have you here.
Thank you. I'm so excited to be here.
All right. We got a lot of questions. So could we start with your backstory?
Sure. I'll try and edit it as much as possible. I graduated from PT school back in 1996, and my first job as a sports and orthopedic physical therapist was in a small town in southwestern Colorado called Cortez. And what I learned very quickly was that the information that I had learned in PT school did not help me with difficult patients at that clinic. I could help people with sprains, strains, post-surgical, all that kind of stuff. But if it came down to anything difficult like back pain, neck pain, headaches, chronic shoulder, knee, anything like that, I was at a loss. And so I went into a deep depression because of that, because I had spent so much time and focus, and I felt like this was my life's calling kind of thing. And I thought, I should be better than this. It shouldn't be this hard. And I just continued to fail. And I took all these continuing education courses, and if everything didn't line up exactly how it presented in the course, it just didn't help me in the clinic.
Sure.
And so I got to this crossroads, Bob, where it was either I stopped being a PT because I was just a failure, or I tried to figure this out. And so I decided to try and figure it out because I spent a lot of money on my education up to this point and a lot of time.
Agreed.
And I loved being a PT. When I was helping people, it just made me feel so good. So I remembered back in PT school, someone had mentioned Dr. Shirley Sahrmann. And intuitively, I felt that our pain was due to how we're using our bodies. And so, and I remember Dr. Shirley Sahrmann seemed to teach something about this, movement impairment syndromes. And so I thought, you know what, I'm going to look up Dr. Shirley Sahrmann's work. And I took all of her courses. I read her textbooks several times. And that was the thing. It felt like I was coming home, because that was the thing that finally made sense to me. It linked movement impairments with pain. And so I worked with her information for a few years. I was doing great. But then, Bob, as you know, the better you do, the more difficult patients start knocking on your door.
Right.
And so the next level of patients weren't responding to that information as well.
Really?
And so then I started looking, further. And then I found Thomas Meyer's work in fascia. And he wrote a book called Anatomy Trains. And Dr. Sahrmann identified 3 patterns of issues that affect back pain. And Thomas Myers found fascial superhighways running through the body that almost exactly correspond to these 3 patterns that Dr. Sahrmann had found.
Sure.
And so what he helped me do, and these fascial highways link the head to the toe. So what he helped me see was I started experimenting with things further away from, let's say, back, along that fascial highway to start solving back pain, and that started working. And then, again, it happened that more difficult patients showed up at my door, and these were like people who seemed stuck. Like I could change what was happening to their bodies, but it kept coming back again and again. And there was this battery that was charging their body to hold tension in particular patterns. And that's when I discovered Dr. Thomas Hanna's work with Hanna Somatics. And his focus was neurologically based tension patterns based in our reflex patterns that we're born with. And so I studied that for 3 years. And he identified, guess what? 3 identical patterns of dysfunction. The same 3 that Dr. Sahrmann had identified. And they linked to the Thomas Myers fascial superhighways. And I thought, This cannot be coincidence. All three of these different researchers are pointing in the same direction.
Right.
So I spent the next few years integrating all of this information, and I was still working out of my home at this point, trying to figure all this out. And my policy was, if I don't get you better, you don't pay me. So I had to figure it out really quick. But then I thought, you know what? Will this work in an orthopedic setting, though? So that's when I bought my physical therapy clinic to test my theories in my clinic, because I didn't think another therapist owner would allow me to experiment with their patient populations in this way. And so within just a few years, our business quadrupled because people were getting better so fast, and doctors were noticing.
Right.
And then the next step was, can I train another therapist to do this? And that's what I've been doing these past 10 years, is training my other therapists to do this, and they get the same results too. So it's not just me. It's really how the body works. And so I call it a systems approach to solving pain, as opposed to our component thinking that we're taught in PT school, and often a lot of CEC courses after PT school. So long answer to a short question. Sorry about that.
It all makes sense. You know.
Yeah.
So
Rick, it does. It's very intuitive.
So you've written many books. For our listeners that do not know, we have like 5 of them here, I believe.
Yeah.
Could you describe the basic theme behind each book? Well, behind the books in general, I should say.
Yeah. So all the books are part of the Fixing You series. And really the whole gist of the books is it's not me fixing you. It's putting the power back into the patient's hands to fix themselves. So every book integrates or incorporates this systems thinking. So in the first part of the book, I explain how everything works together. And then the second part of the book, I go into the exercises that will solve these systemic problems. Because frankly, you know, the way we're taught in school and courses, if people, that's good for a lot of things, but if people are having chronic pain, usually it's because no one's looking at them as a complete system. And so that's what my books do. And even though I've broken them down into a back pain, hip and knee, and then foot and shoulder and neck pain, I had to do that because if I wrote one big book for all of our whole system, no one would ever read that.
Right.
And it would be too overwhelming. So I had to break them down into smaller bits that people can absorb. And that's why there are 6 books in the series. And that's basically how all of them approach solving problems, is from a systems standpoint, which is integrating movement, this neurological stuff, and this fascia stuff. All right? And simple exercises that solve these on many levels, these problems.
Well, they're great books. Really enjoy
Thank
them.
you. Thank you.
Do you know by chance which book is your most popular?
Well, by far, back pain. And that was the one I rewrote back in 2015 to incorporate. So the other books haven't incorporated this somatics and fascial information that I've learned.
Right.
But the 2015 rewrite, because there were such extensive changes I made in my thinking from 2010 to 2012 or 13, I thought, I've got to rewrite this book. And so that is by far my bestseller, not because it's a great written book. It's because so many people have chronic back pain and are looking for answers, and sciatic pain or SI joint pain or whatever. And they're not getting the answers, and that's why these books sell well, even now.
Yeah, 10 years later, right? 10 years later?
Well, the neck pain book was published in 2009. I wrote that in 2007 and 8. All the other books were published in 2010, and the back book was republished back in 2015. And that was before I bought my clinic. So my clinic taught me that not only all of these things are occurring, but then because I had such a huge volume of people, all 15 patients a day, so what I saw was, this stuff is happening in patterns in people. So it's all following a pattern of systemic dysfunction rather than just fixing this or that in the same person. It's about how they're moving and how they're using the body in patterns. And so that's when I realized I can't rewrite all of these books again. And that's when I created my downloadable home programs based on what I discovered in my orthopedic clinic for the last 9 years or 10 years, applying all this information. So I've distilled it down even more to make it even easier for people to understand and follow.
And where are those available, Rick?
Oh, well, those are available if you go to fixingyouMethod.com.
Gotcha.
All of my downloadable programs are there. And so easy to find.